Alright, what's up guys? Welcome back to another Beach Boys album ranking video. Today we're up to number 6 out of 30, so right up there, almost to the top 5. Had so much fun doing all of these reviews, gonna have fun doing the rest of them. And thank you guys all for watching, I really appreciate it. But, yeah, today we're up to a super fucking unique album. One of the most unusual, but also one of the greatest albums the Beach Boys ever made. And there's so many interesting things I have to say about it, but before we get to that, just gonna mention the last review. So last review we checked out number 7 out of 30, Friends from 1968. That is an absolute classic by every sense of the word. It's such a phenomenal, unique, one-of-a-kind record within the Beach Boys catalog, like the one we're talking about today. But I really hope you guys enjoyed that one. The album itself is just such a just perfect representation of how unique the Beach Boys were and still are. You know, they're still around, they still tour. Not as a whole complete group, but in two separate camps, you know. But yeah, so anyway, Friends, amazing album. Hope you guys enjoyed that review. Today we're jumping up about 9 years to a completely different time period for the band. To a time where things were coming back together, so it seemed, but they were really not. They were kind of falling back up. They were falling apart, even though it seemed like they were coming back together. So that's kind of a complicated. There's a complicated story to it. So I guess I'll really just start with a backstory. So let's backtrack back to 1974 to Endless Summer, the greatest hits compilation that went to number 1. So before Endless Summer, the band had been producing just great fucking artistic collections of songs, great albums. There's a string of 4 albums from 1970 to 1973. Sunflower, Surf's Up, Carl and the Passions, Holland, where, you know, yes, the band was not seeing the same level of commercial success they once were in the 60s. They're really going their own path to create just great music, creating what they wanted to make. And, you know, nowadays those records are looked back upon as some of their absolute best. You know, they're just doing awesome things, creating unique records at the time. And I guess you know, the band was kind of bummed that they weren't seeing the same level of commercial success that they once were. But at the same time, it made them really feel good knowing that they were putting out stuff they like to put out. But you know, after all of that, after all of that work after all of the work that they had done, Capitol put together a greatest hits collection in 1974 called it Endless Summer, released it, and boom, went to number 1, and it blew the band up. You know, from about, I guess, 7 years of really not seeing anywhere near the same level of success that they had once been seeing, they blew up again, and they were kind of just shocked by it because they're like, wow, how the fuck did this happen? And then all of a sudden, the entirety of the world had their eyes on the Beach Boys again, or the entirety of the world had their eyes on the Beach Boys again, and it really made the record labels, the public, the fans open their eyes to just be like, what the fuck just happened? And because of that instant surge of success, Warner Brother Records, the band, and basically everybody in the music world kind of urged Brian Wilson to come back into the band as their leader. You know, even though they had been making great music those 6 or 7 years after their fall from grace, basically. You know, even though Brian had been writing a lot of it, he had really been in the background. At that time, he wasn't the leader, he wasn't the producer, and nearing the like the early to mid 70s, he was really not in a good state at all. His reclusive period, where he was sitting in bed for 3 years, doing a bunch of drugs, you know, gaining a bunch of weight, ruining his voice in the process. But even with all of that, Endless Summer kind of changed it all, and they basically were like, you know what, Brian, you're the guy who made this music in the first place and made the success of our band popular. So, you know, you should really come back into the forefront of the band and be our leader again. So, in about 74, 75, 76, there was a whole Brian's Back campaign where they're like, guys, Brian Wilson, he's back in the band. And because of that, you know, because of how iconic Brian is, and especially at the time he was, but still is, the band gained a huge live following in that exact same time period because of the hype that Brian was back. So now they were starting to play huge fucking venues, huge stadiums again because of Brian, and this basically created a want for new material, especially featuring Brian's contributions. So in 1976, they put out an album called 15 Big Ones, the first album produced by Brian Wilson since Pet Sounds, so 10 years. And even though it was kind of a mixed bag of an album that I talked about a while ago, it still was important at the time because, I mean, yes, it was like half old covers and then half new songs. It really showed that, you know, Brian could still do it. He could still produce music, write new music, and still be the face of the band, even if it was in not the best of times due to his mental and physical state. But 15 Big Ones came out to very mixed reactions, but it charted very well and basically gave Warner Brother the kind of, you know, Warner Brother Records looked at the Beach Boys and they're like, you know what, that last album did really well. Good job, guys. You know, Brian, it worked. People love you. Let's put you in the studio. Let's have you make a record by yourself again. And the rest of the band agreed because, you know, they're like, you know what, he was the one who did that back in the day, and let's just see what he can do again. So in that whole time period from about 75 to 77, the Beach Boys went into the studio with Brian, but mainly Brian was writing stuff, and they worked together a bunch of songs, and what eventually came out of all of that was the album we're talking about in today's review. So I just realized I haven't shown the album this whole time. You guys can already see it, but I mean, usually I get into it much quicker than that. But basically, yeah, so from the culmination of all that studio work, Brian's songwriting, came the Beach Boys' I think it was 21st studio album, released on April 11th, 1977, The Beach Boys Love You. Now, this essentially is a Brian Wilson solo album through and through. It's almost completely a Brian solo album, and I'll get to that, but I guess I really just have to start with the album cover, designed by Dean Torrance of Jan and Dean. Oh my god, what a fucking awesome album cover. Honestly, probably my favorite, maybe second favorite out of the band's entire catalog. It's so fucking cool and unique. Like, the pixel art design, just the text, it's unlike anything in the Beach Boys catalog in terms of covers, but besides that, it's unlike anything I've ever seen on an album cover. Really awesome. The back cover's got the same thing. The guys in the middle, and you could just instantly see. I mean, you could have seen it on the 15 Big Ones cover, but on here as well, you know, you just see the change in how the band looks compared to the 60s. You know, all bearded, the fucking beard boys, basically. Brian, Dennis, Carl, Mike, Al. This was such a drastically different time for the band, and, you know, they had the success with Endless Summer, 15 Big Ones, but with this one, it's just a completely different story. So as I said, I don't want to get too off track here. As I said, Brian was basically put at the helm of the band. He was the guy now. He was the one who was, after years of not really being there all that much, they're like, you know what, you're going to produce it, you're going to write it, and, you know, whether it's for the better or for the worse, I think it came out amazingly well. But, you know, at the time for Brian's health, I don't know if it was for the best, but anyway, he started writing songs and using a new style of recording and using different things that he had learned, and just with the change of the times, the change in their voices, and just how they had matured, what came out was one of the most unique albums in the entire Beach Boys catalog. And I guess I'm really just going to get in the track list because I don't want to waste any more time on the backstory. So yeah, so this album, as I said, released on April 11th. It had some singles, I'm pretty sure. I actually don't even fucking remember what the singles were. So I honestly really can't say. But this album starts off with a track written by Brian and Mike, actually. One of the few co-written tracks. Brian pretty much wrote all of it, but there was a few songs here and there that he had helpers. Anyway, it's called Let Us Go On This Way, sang by Carl, and from the get-go, you can just tell how instantly different this record is compared to everything else the band ever did. The number one thing you'll notice is the production. It is completely unlike anything else. It's one of the primary sounds of this record that is completely unique is this use of a synthesizer. And it really gives this album a lot of its charm. So compared to a lot of the other Beach Boys albums from the same time, you know, before and after this one, it was a much more natural sounding. The Beach Boys always had a very natural sound. A lot of horns, a lot of piano and stuff like that. This album is, I mean, it has that still, but you notice it's much more funky in a way, like just a much different sound. It reminds me of kind of like a Funky Pretty from Holland from 1973, the last song on that record. You know, features synths as well, and this one really embodies that, but in a much bigger way, just a much more upfront way. Rock and Roll Music, the single from 75, had synth on it, but on here it's just like full frontal synth, and Let Us Go On This Way, it's sang by Carl. You know, by this point, Carl's voice was, you know, at its peak. So fucking good. I love his vocals on here. And then you hear Brian's voice in the back in the harmonies, and you're like, wow, his voice is rough, but it's such a unique, cool vibe. The song is just really about, it's kind of like We'll Run Away from All Summer Long in a way, where it's like, you know, just let us, you know, mom, dad, let me and my girlfriend be on our own, do our own things. It's a really fucking great song, and I love it a lot, and opens up the record greatly. Moves into track 2 called Roller Skating Child, written completely by Brian. He did the lyrics, again with the amazing fucking awesome synthy production. This one's about going to the roller skating rink, and you know, it's written in the perspective of a teenager. A lot of people think the song is creepy because it's like you're 35-year-old dude singing about going to a roller skating rink with like a fucking teenage girl and making out. I mean, I could see how people can see it's weird, but I don't think it's weird because it's written, they wrote it in the perspective of a teenager, which in that case, it's completely fine. I don't think there's anything creepy about it. It's nowhere near something like Hey Little Tomboy. But this song is fucking awesome. And actually, this one might have been released as a B-side or something, which I don't really remember, but I know they played it live around the same time when this album came out. But yeah, Roller Skating Child is fucking awesome. It's such a cool song. You know, the we'll make sweet loving when the sun goes down, they'll even be more when the mama's not around. That whole chorus thing, the whole hook. Mike sings this one, so it's one of his leads on the album. Really cool. The choruses are great. And then I love Brian at the end when he says that little thing, like the roller skating child. And you could really hear how fucked up his voice is due to drugs and everything and all the smoking and drinking, whatever. Really messed up voice, but amazing song. Leads into track 3, back to the messed up voice, sang by Dennis. This one's called Mona. And this one's fucking cool. It's basically the same thing for the whole song. It's a very short song, I think under 2 minutes. But it basically just goes along on the same melody, same rhythm with Dennis's voice. But the lyrics are ever changing throughout the whole song. There's no chorus, there's no bridge. It's basically just endless verses. But Dennis's voice, you know, his was even worse than Brian's. You know, Brian's voice at the time was fucked up. Dennis's was even worse. He did everything Brian did, but like double that. All the drugs, drinking. So his was even more rough. But his vocal performance on Mona is absolutely great. I really love it. It's just about a girl named Mona, you know, want to come over for dinner and then like listen to music and listen to Phil Spector, Be My Baby. You know, and you could tell Brian wrote these lyrics because they're so innocent and fun. And I'll get to all my other thoughts at the end, but one of the key ingredients for this record is the sense of innocence and childish wonder this album has within it. It feels like an album made by a guy who has nothing to worry about. He's, you know, it's kind of sad in a way because he really doesn't even know what normal is anymore. All these songs are completely out of the ordinary and just weird. But for Brian, it was just, you know, writing about childhood things. And it reminds me of Syd Barrett in a way from Pink Floyd, where it's like, Brian was just writing from his heart and he wasn't worried about the record industry. You know, it wasn't like a time when he was creating Smile, when he was worried about everything. He was really just having fun and doing what he wanted to do. And especially in the lyrics on Mona, but the whole album, it just shows like a childish wonder. So I really appreciate it about it. Track 4 is a really fucking cool song. It's called Johnny Carson, written about the talk show host Johnny Carson. For those of you who don't know, Johnny Carson was basically like the Jimmy Fallon, Jimmy Kimmel of the 70s. Where he was a very popular talk show host. So the band, well, not even the band, Brian wrote a song about him. And it's basically just a tribute to him being like, I like your show, you're a cool guy, we really like you, the band likes you. And it's a really cool song. I really fucking like the song. Mike starts the vocal, Brian has some vocals or some harmonies. This one's really fucking cool. I love the instrumentation and production on it. This album was actually mainly played by Brian. Pretty much does everything. It's very keyboardy, synthy, and then pretty much almost all of the drums on here are done by Brian, besides a select few moments. But yeah, so Johnny Carson's a really cool song. Apparently, it was actually shown to Johnny Carson, and he was like, "Hey, it's pretty cool." You know, he didn't really say it was like top-notch art or anything, but he liked the song. He said it was like a funny joke, and you know, I think it's really cool. I think it's a great song. You know, nothing like crazily deep or anything, but that's kind of part of this album. You know, there's a few songs on here that are super deep and really cool and artsy and everything, but a lot of this album is just fun and unique and stands on its own. So that's kind of part of the reason why it's so good. It's so fucking unique. It stands by itself. So yeah, that's track number 4, Johnny Carson. track number 5, you know, the order of the songs in the back is actually completely out of order, so I don't even remember. Oh, okay. So track 5, here's where things get interesting. So as I mentioned on the Adult Child review, 2 of the songs on that album were actually outtakes from the late 60s, early 70s, because apparently they didn't have enough songs to fill out the album or whatever. On here, track number 5 is actually again, another outtake from about 1970 called Good Time. And this one is a completely different contrast to the rest of the record. You know, the most of this record is, you know, its iconic sound with the synth, Brian's rough voice, Dennis's rough voice, this completely childish sound. But then you have Good Time, which is early 70s Brian, pure, clean voice, mixed with a much more natural, not really natural production, but just that time period's production. And you hear it and you're like, well, this is very different. But that being said, I think it fits the vibe of the album because the song itself is very silly along with this whole album. And man, I just really fucking love it. Brian's voice carries the song so much. I love the chorus when he does his falsetto and everything. Just something about it is so good. And it really just reflects the whole mood of this album. Like, you don't really have to take yourself too seriously. And for that reason, that's one of the reasons why this album is so high up on my ranking. Track 6, I'm pretty sure I remember what it is, but let me just look one more time. Okay, yeah, so track 6. So this one is actually really cool. This is written by Brian, but sang by Al, so it's actually Al's lead vocal on the album, his one lead vocal, called Honka Down the Highway. This one's really cool. Starts off like just a bass drum snare beat. Very reminiscent of Be My Baby, but like much less produced, just much simpler. But this one's really cool, you know, it's just about fucking going down the highway, just driving, having a good time. Al sings it really well. High energy, I love how it sounds, everything sounds really great. You know, the synths, you know, as I said, sound really great, but one thing that's cool about them is that they're analog. They're not like 80s super digital synthesizers, they're like analog synths, like the Moog synthesizers. Talking too fast. But, no, it sounds really fucking good. Al's voice is great. And leads into one of the most unusual but also coolest things the Beach Boys ever did, the last track on side 1, Ding Dang. This is a minute-long song written by Brian and Roger McGuinn from the Byrds, and it is just complete fucking insanity. It is just one note, one chord, and then the guy's going ding, dang a ding, woo, ding and a ding. I can't make this shit up. This is the Beach Boys. It's the same band that made Surfin' USA. Ding Dang, yeah, it's the biggest meme within the Beach Boys community because like it's fucking hilarious that it even exists, and it's really hard to explain it. But apparently one night Brian was at Roger McGuinn's house and he started playing this, you know, this repetitive, you know, kind of little riff on the piano. And Roger McGuinn was like, oh, that's pretty cool. So I think he went with Brian, they wrote some lyrics and kind of like worked the melody out. And then Roger McGuinn was like, all right, I'm gonna go to bed. Apparently Brian was up all night for like 12 hours just fucking playing Ding Dang on repeat. So, you know, as you could tell, Brian was crazy at the time. But what came out was one of the most hilarious and funny songs the Beach Boys ever recorded. I really can't say much more about it, just listen to it. It's a super short, funny song. And I mean, for the end of side 1, it really embodies the whole funny, childish vibe of the album. And it's just so unique, it stands alone. Side 2, let me go check it out real quick because I actually can't really remember completely. I'm gonna go flip the record over because sometimes it's like I have a hard time remembering every single song. Anyway, so to me, as much as great as the first side is, side 2 is like where all my favorite songs are. So side 2 opens up with a song called Solar System, again written by Brian, completely written by Brian. Brian has the lead vocal on here, and this one's so fucking awesome. I love this song so much. It's just about the solar system, just the planets, the Milky Way galaxy, the asteroids, comets, the stars, whatever. It's so sick. It's so unlike anything you'll ever hear from anybody. And it just shows Brian's mind at the time. His mindset was just to create music he wanted to hear. He wasn't being pressured by anybody. No, even Mike Mike was all for it. He wasn't discouraging Brian anyway. He was just like, all right, Brian, just write whatever you want. And Solar System, opening up side 2, begins a string of amazing fucking songs on the whole second side, and I absolutely love it. It's followed up by probably the biggest fan favorite on the album, If you're gonna consider it a hit, this is probably like the biggest hit on the album. You know, none of these singles I think ever even charted. If they did, it was super low. But it's called "The Night Was So Young." The night is so young, or the night was so young. This one's sang by Carl, and it's a gorgeous fucking song. Brian comes in later on it, but man, really, it's just a beautiful fucking song. And you could hear it in the background a little bit. I'll let it play. Just it's such a calm vibe to it. Carl's voice is so beautiful. The guitar bends in the background. I just love it so much, man. It's just such a great song, and definitely one of my favorites on the album. Beautiful. Leads into actually my absolute favorite song on the record. It's called "I'll Bet He's Nice," and what I really love about "I'll Bet He's Nice" is that it is one of the few moments in the entire Beach Boys catalog where it is only the Wilson brothers. Yeah, so this song is basically a collaboration between the three of them, Brian, Dennis, and Carl. Starting with Dennis, Brian comes in and they kind of alternate on the verses, and then Carl comes in on the bridge, and it's just a magic moment. The synths are just so fucking pure and unique and amazing on here, and the whole vibe of it is just, it's so awesome. And I'm really gonna say that about all these songs. I kind of recap at the end what I truly think about everything on this record, but "I'll Bet He's Nice" is my favorite song on the record, followed up by another fucking beautiful song called "Let's Put Our Hearts Together." Brian actually sings this one with his wife Marilyn. On the insert on the album, there's actually a really cool dedication. So, in the album, you get this picture, a bunch of black and white photos of the band, but then on the back, you get a dedication to Brian from the rest of the band and Marilyn, and there's a picture of them together. And it's really kind of sad to see this, because you think everything's really going well at the time. You think, oh, everything's better for the band, but Brian and Marilyn got divorced like 2 years after this record came out. The band started falling apart after this, and this was kind of like a Pet Sounds 2 in a way, where really at the time it was almost too good to be true, and the final product came out amazingly, and then kind of everything after was starting to fall apart, and they were losing it, and it's kind of like part 2 of that. So anyway, Let's Put Our Hearts Together. Absolutely amazing ballad, sang, as I said, by Brian and Marilyn. Marilyn's voice is really fucking great. She was in a band called The Honeys with her sister Diane and another girl in the 60s. And, her voice really shines on the song, along with Brian's really gruff voice, but really great. Definitely like top 3, top 5, so up there on the very best of the album. Followed by that is a really fucking interesting song. So, this one's called "I Wanna Pick You Up." The lead is sang by Dennis. Brian comes in later, harmonies come in later. But this one is really controversial within the Beach Boys fan base, because about half of the people think it's just about fatherhood, a very sweet, unassuming song about being a dad and, just caring for your baby, and it's very sweet and simple. And the other half thinks it's completely different and thinks it's a really fucked up song, because there's one line at the end where Brian's like, pat her on her butt. And it's like, what the fuck? Okay, that's kind of weird. And you kind of think about it, and you're like, okay, am I pat her on her butt, babies and shit? Like, is that weird? But I really don't. I think it's, at the time, all of them were parents at this point. I think, yeah, Carl, Brian, and Dennis, I think at the time were all had kids, were all getting ready to have kids. Brian did. I think Dennis did. Maybe Carl did. Maybe he had kids later, but I'm pretty sure they all had kids at this point. But no, really for me, I think Dennis's vocal is great. I love the harmony at the end, the acapella part at the end. And I don't know. The lyrics to me don't bother me at all. I think it's nothing more than just a fatherhood song, just being like, it's awesome having a kid. So that's really all I think of it. It has a childish vibe to it, the actual music itself, but the lyrical meaning, I don't really take it too deeply. Next is followed up by a really cool song. This one might have been released as a single. It's called "Airplane." Mike sings this one. This one's really cool. I really fucking like it. It's just, it's really just, it's what the title says. It's funny because a lot of the songs on this album are basically just what the title says. You don't really have to think too deeply about it. And I kind of really appreciate this album for that reason. Airplane's just about, being in an airplane, looking down at the city, going to the airport. Simple things like that. But it really works well. Mike and Brian switch off vocals. It's great. And then I love the whole second half where it picks up on the energy. Great song. leads into the last track on the album. Not one of my favorites on the record, and a lot of people agree with me, but I still think it's a good song. It's called "Love Is a Woman." Brian sings this one, and I don't know. I think it's a cool song. I mean, this is where his voice is really the most gruff, but I think it's still really great. I mean, I still think it's a great song, and they actually played this one live on some sort of TV show. I don't remember which one it was, like the Mike Douglas show or something, but that's it. I talked really fast during this review, but really, it's kind of hard to go track through track for this album because this album is much more of a collective whole kind of thing than like an individual songs kind of thing. And I'll explain my thoughts behind that, but really, the Beach Boys' "Love You" is just one of the most unique album experiences you'll ever listen to, and it just puts into perspective Brian Wilson's mental state at the time. He wasn't fearing the music industry. He wasn't fearing the rest of the band wanting something more commercial. He was just writing from his heart. And to me, this just feels like just like a description, like an autobiography of Brian Wilson in 1977. And from the synth production to all the vocal performances from all the other guys, it's just so good and it's so honest, and there's nothing about it that feels fake. I remember when I first went through the Beach Boys catalog and listened to all their records, this one really weirded me out. Like, I didn't really understand the hype behind it at first because, this album's hyped to oblivion within the Beach Boys fan base. And at first I was like, I don't really get it. Like, I don't know what the hype is about. But like my fourth or fifth time listening to this record, it just fucking clicked like that. I can't snap. I'm really bad at it. That did not work. Anyway, like fourth or fifth time I listened to it and then it just clicked for me like that. And it was like, holy shit. I understand why this is hyped so much. And oh man, I went on a walk right after it clicked. I listened to it once, it clicked that time, and then I went on a walk after that, and that whole walking, going on a walk listening to this record still resonates with me to this day just because of how it made me feel. This album makes me feel a certain way. It's a very happy record, and as I said, it represents Pet Sounds 2 in a way because back in '66 they had Pet Sounds. It was received amazingly, commercially not as much, but critics loved it. And then after, they were working on Smile, and it never came out, and they kind of started falling apart after that. They basically, 10 years later, repeated the whole same thing again. After everything had collapsed, they released Endless Summer, 15 Big Ones, and then Brian wrote this, and it was met with amazing critical reception. People loved it, but commercially didn't do well, and then after that, it started falling apart again. And, Adult Child was gonna be released after it as a follow-up, but it was rejected, never came out. So it's very interesting to me because you have 2 records. Well, in total, you have 4 records, 4 Brian Wilson solo records. 2 of them came out, were received amazingly, and both were supposed to have follow-ups that never came out. So it's kind of a coincidence. And then it's followed up by 10 years or 11 years after this one in 1988 with Brian Wilson's first solo record, just his self-titled. And after he was going to put out another album called Sweet Insanity, which never came out. So it kind of happened 3 times in 3 different decades with 66, 77, 88. It's just crazy. It's a very crazy coincidence. But basically, yeah, it's a lot of talking, but there's so many things I have to say about this one. And really, if I have to give my reasoning why this album is so high, it's not for any specific reason. It's because of the complete whole. The whole vibe, sound, and aura behind this record is so unique, and to me, I think it's the whole childish innocence. There's nothing about this record that feels manufactured. For example, like MIU, the album that came out after this, just feels like a complete manufactured, artificial, cobbled together collection of songs that have no rhyme or reason or connection to any of the other ones on the record. It just feels completely scattershot. Love You to me is just, it stands alone. It's just everything works together. Even there's no really weak songs on the record. I think every song is at the very least good. But even the lesser good songs, you have songs like, Let Us Go On This Way, or I'll Bet He's Nice, or Let's Put Our Heart Together, that are like obviously fucking amazing. And then you have a song like, Love Is a Woman, or maybe Honking Down the Highway, that while they're still really good, they don't meet the same highs as the other ones. But, yeah, what I was basically trying to get at is that even the lesser good songs in here are still really good, and they all have the same vibe. Even Good Time, which is an outtake from 1970, still has that silly, childish vibe. And, they would touch on that same sort of thing on Adult Child, and I talked about that in that review. But to me, this one feels much more realized. I mean, 1, because it came out. And then two, because, you know, Adult Child is just fucking, like, this album is weird. Adult Child is just fucking unusual. Like, this album's unusual. Adult Child's, like, fucking strange. It's I don't know. And they're, like, companion records, too. I mean, 15 Big Ones as well. It can kind of be seen as, like, the unholy trio. 15 Big Ones, Beach Boys Love You, Adult Child. But, I don't know, yeah. So, Beach Boys Love You, basically a Brian solo record. You know, he produced it. Carl helped him produce it, and like Carl and Dennis really helped him with it. The other guys too. Bruce wasn't in the band at the time, so it's really just the main five guys. But overall, the Beach Boys Love You just captures a certain vibe in music and just has a certain aura to it that I really can't explain, and they never really reproduced it, and nobody in history has really ever reproduced it. People like to call this their punk album because as I said, it doesn't follow any music trends of the time. It stands alone, you know, in the sea of mediocrity in the 70s, you know, including the two albums that would come after this, well, the three albums that would come after this, you know, MIU, LA, Keeping the Summer Alive. You know, those aren't terrible albums, but they're definitely, compared to Beach Boys Love You, they're like the most mediocre things on the planet, where it's completely standalone, unique musical experience. So, yeah, I think that's pretty much what I have to say about it. If there's any history I missed, any little parts of any songs I missed, let me know. My main reasons for loving this album so much is just, I mean, as I said, the vibe of it, but just the whole sound. I love all the vocal performances. Brian's and Dennis's rough voice are really good. Carl's voice is great. Mike, Al, sound great. The production is great. I love the synths. And it just feels like such a one-of-a-kind collective whole that just you really can't explain it unless you listen to it. So for me, the Beach Boys Love You is an absolute 10 out of 10 record. Perfect record. It captures a vibe in music that's really only Brian Wilson at the time period could make. You know, nobody else could make this album besides Brian in 1977. And for that reason, it's one of their best records. Is something like Friends maybe more cohesive, you know, song for song? Maybe, but for me, this record is just, it represents a more important time for the band, and it's, I don't know, man, it's just something about it. It's just, the vibe is awesome. So, you know, Friends, amazing record. Smiley Smile, Adult Child, Wild Honey, all the ones I've talked about before this are awesome. I love them all. But Love You is very special for me. This will always hold a special place in my heart. And yeah, so I'd give this one a 10 out of 10 in my opinion. And coming up after this review is the top 5. So I'm really excited to do all of those. I'm really excited to hear what you guys think. And, you know, doing all of these reviews have been so fun and so fulfilling. I really love recording them. And yeah, so Beach Boys Love You, released on April 11th, 1977. I'd give it a 10 out of 10 easily. I love the album cover. I love the sound. I love the vocals. I love everything about it. So, favorite song, I'll Bet He's Nice. The Night Was So Young, Solar System, Let's Put Our Heart Together. I Want to Pick You Up's really good. Let Us Go On This Way. Ding Dang's awesome. Good Time. The whole fucking record. And even the lesser great ones are still really good. So, that's basically what I have to say. So, let me know what you guys think about the Beach Boys Love You in the comments. And I had a lot of fun making this review. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next album review. Peace out.